Last week, veteran actor Kamal Haasan courted controversy by declaring that Kannada was born out of Tamil, the question of which Indian language is oldest, and by extension most native to the soil, has been a political hot topic since the mid 20th century. Some say it's Sanskrit, others say it's Tamil. But underneath the nationalist furor, paleobotanists, historical linguists, and archaeologists have made stunning discoveries about the linguistic heritage of all Indians, from the lost Gangetic language X to the possible origins of Southeast Asian languages to the homeland of Proto-Dravidian speakers. It turns out that prehistoric Indian languages were as diverse as today's. The term Dravidian today is often associated with India's southern states, and it's linked to ideas of ethnicity, culture, and politics. Here I'll use it only in the linguistic sense. In the Dravidian languages, linguist Bhadriraju Krishnamurthy writes that Dravidian languages are spoken from the tip of the peninsula deep into central India. One isolated Dravidian language, Brahui, is spoken as far west as Balochistan in present-day Pakistan. Anthropologist and historian Thomas Trotman in Dravidian Kingship also found a Dravidian substrate in many place names in Maharashtra and pointed out that Dravidian cultural practices such as first cousin and maternal uncle-niece marriages are practiced by a few castes in Sindh and even Gujarat. So speakers of Dravidian languages and their descendants are extremely widespread. Now, given this vast geographic range, it's natural to ask, who were the original Dravidian speakers? How did they spread and why? By looking at the earliest shared features of all Dravidian languages, we can assemble a hypothetical Proto-Dravidian language from which all modern Dravidian languages descend. We can figure out what plants and animals they saw, what their climate was like, and what their politics and settlements were like. Then we can look at the ecology of the subcontinent, we can look at archaeological digs, and we can see what matches. Distinguished linguist Franklin C. Southworth, in his paper Proto-Dravidian Agriculture, made the most rigorous attempt yet to reconstruct this lost world. Proto-Dravidian speakers had a word for king, they used a similar word for hut and village, suggesting small populations of related families, they knew of various agricultural hunting tools, and a wide variety of wild animals. Around the 3rd millennium BCE, when the Harappan civilization was thriving on the Indus Valley, the speakers of Proto-Dravidian were also aware of many crops such as sorghum and various types of millet and gram. They also had terms for cattle pens and domesticated sheep and goats. Finally, as archaeobotanist Dorian Q. Fuller writes in Non-Human Genetics, Agricultural Origins and Historical Linguistics in South Asia, Proto-Dravidian speakers seem to have lived in a dry, deciduous forest environment. Only one region matches all of these criteria. It's a region where the ranges of the modern Dravidian language families, northern, central, south central, and southern, overlap, and possibly where they radiated from. This is supported by extensive archaeological findings of what's called a southern Neolithic period, with evidence of small mud homes, remains of domesticated and wild animals, and crops. There's a 73% match between Southworth's Proto-Dravidian vocabulary of plants and those found in southern Neolithic sites. But surprisingly, these sites are rather distant from the hotbeds of South Indian linguistic nationalism today. They are neither in South Karnataka nor in Tamil Nadu. Rather, the speakers of Proto-Dravidian, according to two streams of evidence, lived in the Krishna-Godavari Valley in present-day North Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. To be clear, this is not to say that all Dravidian speakers originated from the Krishna-Godavari Valley. If we're being cheeky, no human being originates anywhere except Eastern Africa. But the fact is that even the Proto-Dravidian language has some words borrowed from other language families, namely Austro-Asiatic, which is spoken mostly in Southeast Asia today, with the Munda families of Odisha and Chhattisgarh being the Indian representatives. So this might suggest that the speakers of even earlier stages of Dravidian migrated to the Krishna-Godavari Valley from elsewhere, picking up influences from other languages on the way. Some genetic and linguistic theories link early Dravidian speakers to the Iranian plateau, but that's a matter for another day. Now, the Proto-Dravidian language isn't actually a perfect match for southern Neolithic excavations. The peoples of the southern Neolithic practiced urn burials, but there's no vocabulary for it in Proto-Dravidian. Proto-Dravidian also doesn't match other archaeological candidates such as the Harappan civilization, and if their cities are anything to go by, Harappans must have had a vocabulary for engineering and geometry, but it's practically non-existent in Proto-Dravidian. But at the same time, Proto-Dravidian has words for some crops, especially wheat, which might be of Harappan origin. So the true homeland of the Dravidians is still unclear, but we can say for certain that around 3000 BCE, Proto-Dravidian speakers deep in the South Indian peninsula harnessed agriculture, and as their population exploded around 1100 BCE, they spread out in waves across the Indian subcontinent. As Dr. Suresh Kumar Muthukumaran, a paleobotanist, curator and lecturer at the National University of Singapore told me, quote, broadly, the default Proto-Dravidian agricultural practice was dry farming of millets, pulses and tubers. Irrigated rice farming, alongside cash crops like cotton and sugarcane, became more important in the late 1st millennium BCE. Over the centuries, Dravidian speakers traded words, animals and crops not only with North India but also with Southeast Asia, and a particularly influential branch of these speakers headed south, giving rise to the South Dravidian languages. Some groups became relatively isolated on the Nilgiri hills and developed languages such as Irula and Toda. Others, settling into the expansive coasts and plains, spoke the ancestors of Kannada, Tamil and Malayalam. The language that became Tamil, according to Krishnamurti, branched off around 600 BCE. 3 centuries later, it had developed into Old Tamil, the first Dravidian language to have written culture, but Old Tamil itself was composed of many dialects, which in the centuries after evolved into Middle Tamil and hence into Modern Tamil. Between 800-1200 CE, some Middle Tamil dialects branched off into Malayalam. Now, we can say with confidence that the ancestor of Kannada is not Tamil. It is a lost South Dravidian language related both to the languages of Nilgiris and to Old Tamil. Unfortunately, the earliest written examples of Kannada date to about 450 CE, so we don't have a clear picture of how the language evolved in the centuries prior. After that though, many dialects of Kannada evolved through Old Kannada into Middle Kannada and thence into Modern Kannada. In North Karnataka, Kannada dialects had a fertile exchange with Indo-Aryan languages such as Marathi, which in turn had a Dravidian substrate. It's becoming increasingly clear that this complex mosaic of linguistic borrowings, evolutions, migrations and shifts is a story of all Indians, in fact of all humanity. Rig Vedic Sanskrit provides another early example. Professor Michael Witzel, a linguist and scholar of the Vedas, writes in Substrate Languages in Old Indo-Aryan that already by 1500 BCE, the earliest Indo-Aryan languages had absorbed a chunk of vocabulary from now lost Austro-Asiatic languages in Punjab, a hypothetical Harappan language called Meluhan in Sindh, and a language called Language X, probably spoken by the earliest Neolithic farmers in the Gangetic Plains. A few centuries later, around 800 BCE, Dravidian words suddenly appear in the Vedas, possibly hinting at now lost North Dravidian languages. As noted above, Tamil literature and writing appeared by around 300 BCE. The earliest Tamil literature is called as Sangam poetry after assemblies of poets who compiled it, but linguists generally agree that the word Sangam itself is borrowed from Indo-Aryan languages, and old Tamil poets were clearly aware of Vedic mythology. Meanwhile, around the same time in North India, Prakrit literatures blossomed, overpowering the dominance of Sanskrit in religion and ritual. Krishnamurti argues that Prakrits probably developed from the integration of the speakers of now lost regional Dravidian languages into the North Indian mainstream. And in the medieval period starting around 600 CE, all the major southern Dravidian languages, including both Kannada and Tamil, borrowed extensive political, grammatical and religious terms from a revitalized classical Sanskrit. So, what is indigenous and what is foreign? Which language is oldest when all have branched off from already diverse origins and borrowed from or lent to each other across centuries? India's modern linguistic diversity didn't appear out of nowhere. All the evidence is telling us that we are the inheritors of a complex, multi-dimensional mixing of genes, words, technologies and ideas across timescales of truly mind-boggling proportions. Banal statements that language A is older than language B might set social media aflame and rally nationalists to a cause, but as is increasingly clear, patriotic oversimplifications always trample on the histories and dignities they claim to protect. I'm sure this is a controversial opinion, so if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Follow us everywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Buddha and on Twitter at Kanisetti. We'll see you next week.